Did you know that scratching the ground is an essential chicken behavior? And if your chickens can't get lots and lots of scratching time every day, things can start to get a bit problematic. Today we're going to dive into how you can support your chicken flock to happily scratch their days away and why this is so important. A chicken's need to scratch is a hardwired behavior. It is purely instinctual. Chickens have to scratch. They absolutely don't have a choice in the matter. They need to scratch. Studies have been done looking at this to try and work out if it is an absolutely essential behavior for chickens. And what a certain study did, whether you agree with their methods or not, but what they did is they blindfolded chicks from hatch day until day 3. And those chicks, even though they couldn't see anything, they couldn't learn behavior by seeing behavior, they still scratched and preened their feathers, even though they had not learned that behavior. So they determined from that rather questionable from a moral perspective study that preening and scratching are absolutely essential behaviors for chickens to do. Interestingly enough, chicks need to be taught to drink, but they don't have to be taught to scratch. And you may have seen this sort of behavior from chicks if you've got day-old chicks from a hatchery or you've hatched your own in an incubator. They will just go onto the pile of food and start scratching away, even if they've never seen another chick or chicken perform that behavior before. Adult chickens who have been kept in indoor environments where they haven't had an opportunity to scratch, like battery hens from big battery cage farms where they are on wire floors and don't really have the room to perform many of their natural behaviors. Well, when those chickens are taken into a more natural environment, even if they're just given more space indoors with something to scratch, they will start scratching. So I have seen rescued battery hens go out to pasture, being outside for the first time, and they will scratch, even though for their entire lives they've never really been able to experience scratching in a natural kind of way. They just absolutely know how to do it. Which does bring some moral questions into the whole industrial chicken keeping scenario, where we are taking these living, breathing, instinctually driven animals and putting them into an environment that doesn't meet their needs very well. But that is the way it is, and I'm really, really glad that people are able to have chickens in their backyards where they can scratch. Of course, anyone with a flock of backyard chickens are going to see a lot of scratching. And I obviously see my chickens do a lot of scratching, but what really, really illustrates this fact so much for me is when I watch a mama hen and her chicks. She just goes scratching crazy when she comes out with her chicks after they have hatched. It's incredible. There is dirt and soil and rocks and all sorts of things flying everywhere. She is just like a one chicken pathway of destruction with her feet. She just absolutely goes crazy with the scratching. Now, all chickens scratch, but broody hen scratching is just on a whole nother level. And the chicks are right there with her, really, really getting in on the action. And they learn to do their scratching, which they already instinctively know how to do, but she really teaches them how to be super, super great at looking for food with that crazy, crazy scratching that she gets out and does. And she will have that like leveled up scratching behavior for a good few weeks while the chicks are starting to just get their feet under them and learn to be strong enough to scratch on their own. When chickens live in natural environments where they can express their natural behaviors, they spend between 50 and 90% of their awake time scratching and pecking the ground. Now, scratching and pecking the ground are behaviors that go together. So they scratch and then they peck at the ground, even if they're not finding food. Scratching is not necessarily a food-seeking behavior in terms of they don't have to be getting food as a reward for their behavior. Chickens are just absolutely hardwired to scratch. So it is related to finding food, because a chicken out in a natural environment, particularly if humans were not providing a lot of the food for the flock, they would be finding their food by their scratching, pecking, foraging behavior. But it's so important to them to find the food from an instinctual perspective that they will keep doing that behavior even if it is not related to actually receiving food from doing the behavior, which is quite an interesting concept. So even if you are providing your chickens, or they're in an industrial indoor keeping system, even if you are providing your chickens with everything that they need in a complete pelleted diet so they don't have to go and do these pecking, foraging, scratching behaviors, they will still do the behaviors. You may have seen some of your chickens, when they're eating from a food dish or a feeder, actually scratching the ground while they're eating. It's really, really connected for them. I will often see chickens in my flock when it's food time and the food has gone down, they will often scratch as they're eating, to the point that they often scratch their food dishes over and actually make it harder to get the food. But they just have to get those legs moving. They have to get scratching. They are behaviors that don't necessarily have to go together, eating and scratching. Now, this concept of needing to perform the foraging behavior that is not directly connected to whether or not food is directly coming is called contra-freeloading. It just describes the concept of an animal, or people even, who want to essentially work for their food, and it is so important for them to go through the motions of food-seeking behavior that they will do that behavior even if they are getting fed without having to do that behavior to get the food. When we can provide environments for our chickens that allows them to express all of their natural instinctive behaviors, we are creating a situation where they can be happy and healthy. When chickens are able to go out and perform their foraging behavior, we're giving them choices. And in this world we live in, a lot of choices get taken away from our animals, from us. So when we can give choices, it's going to help our chickens to be happier. And what I mean by offering them choices is when they're in an environment that supports their natural behavior, their natural foraging behavior, they can choose to scratch over here or scratch over there. They can choose what they're going to peck at and find interesting. If you give them multiple different sort of substrates to scratch in, or they are able to be in a natural environment for a free ranging for a few hours a day, something like that, then it gives them a very beautiful, interesting environment in which to explore and express their behaviors. They can cruise around in the environment they're allowed to be in, and they can do things like pick up little tiny rocks and pebbles which they need to swallow so that they can digest their food properly. And that's really, really important. And of course, you can provide that sort of grit in a dish for them in their run, but they are going to much rather be able to go out and make those choices for themselves as to which sort of pebbles they actually want to eat, rather than us as humans just making those decisions for them. Because hey, I don't know, chickens have got a lot of opinions and I don't necessarily understand why they have those opinions, but they clearly have them for a reason. So allowing our chickens to have choices in their environments, allowing them to choose what kind of behaviors they want to do and express at any moment, is really going to only achieve good things for our flocks. Another reason that chickens need to scratch is to maintain the health of their claws. So claws are a bit like our fingernails. They keep growing. And for chickens, they grow pretty quickly because they're supposed to be out there using their claws to scratch the ground constantly. So if they cannot scratch, or the surface that they're scratching isn't providing a good enough sort of surface for them to be scratching to wear their claws down, then their claws are going to grow. And then you're going to have to trim them. And I mean, if the claws get out of control, then it starts to cause problems, lameness, that causes toes to become deformed and things like that. So usually, if your chickens can go and scratch as much as they want, you don't need to worry about their claw health because it's going to be maintained by itself. Over the years, I've occasionally had a chicken who has become disabled for whatever reason and has been unable to scratch with both legs in equal amounts. And it is absolutely astonishing how quickly their claws will grow when they cannot do their usual amount of scratching. So absolutely essential to make sure that chickens can get their scratching in for the health of their feet and claws. Scratching is also a part of wider natural chicken behaviors, such as preparing nest boxes for laying. Hens will often go in and scratch a little bit to make sure that their nest box is exactly how they want it. They also use lots of scratching to prepare their dust bath areas for making them the perfect giant hole, probably in the middle of your lawn where you don't want it, but they're going to use their scratchy feet to make themselves the perfect dust bathing spot. And it also forms part of the rooster food call, where the rooster makes a call to call the hens over to say that he's found them something, and he will scratch the ground and sort of move his head up and down to indicate that he has something for them. So scratching is an absolutely important component of lots of other chicken behaviors. When chickens are unable to express their foraging, their scratching behavior, things can start to go really, really wrong. Now, this is mostly going to be the case in industrialized caged systems where chickens just absolutely can't express their natural behaviors because they're being kept in small spaces, on wire floors, things like that. But it can happen in backyard flocks as well if you're not really giving enough attention to making sure your chickens don't get too bored. And what will happen is that scratching and pecking behavior, pecking the ground behavior, remember they go together, will be redirected against the flock mates. This will usually result in feather pecking, where one hen will start to pick at the feathers of another hen out of sort of a frustration of not being able to express her natural behavior. And this might be pretty minor, or it could get really, really significant, where the pecking can get to a point where feathers are being taken out in huge numbers and skin is starting to be damaged. And then it can move all the way through to actual cannibalism, where chickens essentially peck each other to death, which is not great and is not natural chicken behavior. That is not how chickens want to interact with each other when they have all of the things that they need to express their natural behaviors. So what are some of the considerations that you can keep in mind when setting up an excellent living environment for your chickens? Well, first of all, you want to make sure that in their run, in the place where they spend most of their day, they can scratch. So you want a soft surface. It's not ideal for the run area to be on concrete or gravel or have a wire floor. So you want to avoid that. If you do have a situation where your run needs to be on a hard surface, then add soft bedding on top of that so your chickens can scratch. That's the first thing. That's sort of like the most important step. One is to make sure there's a soft, scratchable surface. Then the second thing you can do to level that up is to make sure that there are different kinds of surfaces to be scratched. And that can be as easy as just adding different things every so often. That could be when you mow the lawn, you throw in the grass clippings. It could be in the autumn time when the leaves are falling off the trees that you just put a few wheelbarrow loads of leaves into your chicken run. So you're just providing a difference of things to scratch to your chickens. You could get super swanky with it and have like different areas of different surfaces. You could have sand and bark and soil and all sorts of different things, but your chickens are gonna mix that all together anyway. So it's really just about providing a bit of enrichment, a bit of diversity. You can do things like I talked about in my Jungle Up Your Run episode, where you put a compost bin in the middle of your chicken run, and then once a week you let all the compost out of the bin, let the chickens scratch all through it, and then put it back into the compost bin, and which is going to turn your compost into compost really quickly and provide excellent enrichment for your chickens. You can also do things like turning over old rotting logs to let your chickens come in and just scratch around there. So this is all about just providing variety and choices and something different for your chickens, so they're not always feeling like they're in the same place doing the same things every single day. It's really all just about choices. Scratching is all about expressing foraging behavior. So if you can provide opportunities for your chickens to actually get their food via scratching rather than always being out of a feeder or some kind of eating system where it's just provided straight to them, then that's going to make them super happy. That could be as simple as just putting some scratch grains into a pile of leaves. So as they scratch through the leaves, they're going to occasionally find something worthwhile eating. Or it could be working out a way that you feed a portion of their diet sort of scattered around the run, so they have to spend time moving around and looking for it. You can get really creative with this, and of course you do have to balance that with parasite management. If you do have quite a bit of chicken poop in your run and it's not very big and there aren't sort of clear areas, you don't want to be throwing food on top of chicken poop. But bringing in a pile of grass clippings and then sprinkling some scratch grains through it solves that problem and gives your chickens a really awesome thing to do, because they are going to be much more fulfilled if they actually can link their foraging behavior with actually getting a food reward from performing that behavior. So now you know all about why scratching is so important to your chicken flock. I would love to hear about all the ways you have provided scratching, foraging, enrichment in the environments where you keep your chickens.